How do you destroy a community? You make them pay for their own destruction. In the 1850s, the desperate shopkeepers of New York's infamous Five-Point Slum thought they found a loophole to survive the city's deadliest street gangs. They bypassed the corrupt police and hired their own heavily armed vigilante force. But within years, that exact force mutated into the Roach Guard, a brutal mob of extortionist brawlers who turned their weapons on the very merchants paying their wages. Why didn't the legal system step in? Because New York's most powerful politicians needed the gang's violence to rig elections. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover how a community's quest for security accidentally funded its worst nightmare, and why the law protected these monsters, not out of mercy, but for political survival. If you want to see how deep the rot in early American justice really went, subscribe now, because the truth is always darker than the legend. To understand how this disaster unfolded, you have to understand the sheer desperation of old New York. In the mid-19th century, the Five Points wasn't just a slum. It was widely considered the most dangerous square mile on Earth. It was a chaotic maze of decaying tenements, muddy alleys, and open sewage. But the real terror of the Five Points wasn't the filth. It was the total absence of the law. The city's early police force was a joke. Officers were poorly trained, deeply corrupt, and terrified of entering the neighborhood after dark. If a gang of thieves cleaned out your dry goods store, the police wouldn't help you. You were entirely on your own. This power vacuum gave rise to legendary, predatory street gangs like the Dead Rabbits and the Plug Uglies. These weren't romanticized rogues. They were violent syndicates that preyed on the working class. For the small shopkeepers, grocers, and saloon owners trying to scrape together an honest living, every single day was a battle for survival. They realized that if the state couldn't protect their property, they would have to find a force that could. In their desperation, the merchants of the Five Points decided to fight fire with fire. If the city wouldn't provide police, the shopkeepers would buy their own. They pooled their limited savings to hire a group of local toughs, tasked with standing outside their businesses and guarding the storefronts. Initially, it was a classic vigilante initiative. They called themselves the Roach Guard, and their mandate was simple: keep the Dead Rabbits and the Plug Uglies away from shops. For a brief moment, it actually worked, but this arrangement contained a fatal flaw that would soon destroy the neighborhood. In a society with a functioning legal system, authority is held accountable by rules, oversight, and public scrutiny. The Roach Guard had none of that. They were accountable only to the men who paid them, operating in a lawless vacuum. It didn't take long for these primitive security guards to realize a fundamental truth about human nature: unregulated power is intoxicating. They looked at the struggling shopkeepers, they looked at the rival gangs, and they realized they were the strongest force on the block. They asked themselves a dangerous question: why should we settle for a small wage to protect these shops when we can take whatever we want? Almost overnight, the protectors became the predators. The Roach Guard deteriorated from a community watch into a brutal mob of extortionist brawlers. The transition was seamless and, for the shopkeepers, completely terrifying. The monthly fee the merchants used to pay willingly for protection suddenly became a forced tax. If a grocer decided he could no longer afford to pay the Roach Guard, the gang didn't just walk away. The very next night, the store's windows would be smashed, the inventory looted, and the owner beaten within an inch of his life. When the victimized shopkeepers tried to find the rival gangs to blame, they made a horrifying realization. It was the Roach Guard themselves carrying out the attacks. The message was clear: you aren't paying us to protect you from the Dead Rabbits. You are paying us to protect you from us. The system of privatized justice had backfired completely. By bypassing the law to buy security, the community had accidentally financed, organized, and armed its own worst enemy. Under normal circumstances, an open protection racket like this would eventually draw the attention of the authorities. The precinct captain would order arrests, prosecutors would file charges, and a judge would send the extortionists to prison. But the Five Points was not operating under normal circumstances. When the bloodied shopkeepers finally gathered the courage to walk into the local police station to report the Roach Guard, they were met with cold indifference. Sometimes, the officers flatly refused to take the report. Other times, the shopkeeper would leave the station, only to be cornered in an alleyway minutes later by the very gang members they had just tried to report. The justice system wasn't just failing to catch the Roach Guard, it was actively shielding them. This wasn't because the police were lazy or because the gang was too clever to get caught. It was because the Roach Guard had secured an invisible shield from the highest authority in New York City, the notoriously corrupt political machine known as Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall ran New York through a simple, dirty transaction. They traded political favors for immigrant votes. But in the violent slums of the 5 Points, persuasion wasn't enough to win elections. You needed muscle. You needed men who could stand at the polling places, intimidate rival voters, smash ballot boxes, and ensure the right candidate won by any means necessary. The Roach Guard was perfect for the job. In exchange for their violence on Election Day, Tammany Hall gave the gang an invaluable gift: total legal immunity. The political machine controlled the judges, appointed the police captains, and selected the prosecutors. If a Roach Guard member was arrested, a single word from a Tammany boss could make the evidence vanish, the witnesses disappear, or the judge dismiss the charges entirely. This is where the true horror of the case lies. The law was weaponized against the public. The justice system didn't protect the criminals because it was weak. It protected them because the criminals were an essential component of the government's power structure. The very courts meant to enforce justice became the fortress that kept the predators safe. By the late 1860s, the fragile alliance between the street and the state began to fracture. As New York City expanded and the public grew tired of rampant municipal corruption, the state government stepped in to dismantle Tammany Hall's absolute control over the local courts and police. The primitive, compromised police force was eventually replaced by a centralized, professional department. Without their political shields, the Roach Guard could no longer survive in the open. They were gradually hunted down, absorbed into larger criminal syndicates, or wiped out by rival mobs. But their legacy left a permanent scar on the history of American justice. The story of the Roach Guard is a chilling reminder of what happens when the formal justice system breaks down. When citizens abandon due process out of desperation and fund private entities for quick security, they don't solve the problem. They just build a more dangerous predator. Sometimes the greatest threat to a society isn't the criminal breaking the law, but a corrupt system that protects the criminal to protect itself. What do you think about the shopkeeper's choice? Did they have any other option, or was their betrayal inevitable from the start? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the dark corners of legal history.